What was your game plan going into working with him?
His calendar was ever moving. You could never be on top of it. Like whatever was scheduled last night changed by the morning.
If you had to build GaryVee from scratch again today, what would be your playbook?
It's a great question because
my guest today is Jason Morena. He spent 5 years working as Gary Vaynerchuk's camera operator and an extra couple years working as head of content for Mike Posner. This is a great interview. Please stick around. I hope you enjoy. All right, Jason, what was a moment in time when you were working for Gary when you realized that he is the real deal, that he's everything he looks and says he is on YouTube?
I mean, there's a lot of moments. Gary's misunderstood. Some people just think he's a motivational speaker. He just does keynotes. He just makes content. Truthfully, he's running 7 meaningful businesses. VaynerMedia is a 3,000 person global agency. And so that's what he's doing like most of his time. And so being behind the scenes, so I think for context, I was his videographer. He hired me in 2018. I had been already shooting vlog style content with this goal in mind of like, I want to work for this guy. By a little luck and probably a lot of grinding, I got there. The videographers every day would get a text with all the meetings that were greenlit and all the texts that like weren't greenlit to film. And Gary's calendar is not like many others. It's 5-minute meetings back to back from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. I'm this young videographer realizing this guy is the real deal. He is like actively having 50 meetings every day. And now I'm like in the behind the scenes of it. And we're trying to figure out along the way, like what is something that's not maybe client related that we could film. And then something that, you know, is like worth recording for the vlog or content. But I think to go back to your question, I mean, there's so many, like when TikTok was, you know, just turned from Musical.ly into it, you know, like this platform that was becoming something, Gary was like on it before anyone on the team. You know, we're a 30-person team. We're well aware of like that it's becoming popular. And this is before COVID. This is 2019. And I remember he told us a few times, he's like, hey, like we need to be serious about this platform. And we kind of just kept what we were doing. We had a lot already going on between like YouTube and Insta and everything that we were hacking. And then it got to a point where Gary was like, hey, we're gonna have to like reconsolidate the team if we don't figure this out. It was like, hey, like we need to like really go hard on this. And he was right. And like, I think that like speaks to, I don't want to use the word like futurist, but he knows like when something's like about to become something. He was right. We built a small little pocket on the team, on Team Gary, and you know, all credit to my buddy Caleb Ralston and obviously the support of the team around him to build out his TikTok from like 0 to I think it was like 3 million in like 6 months. And so, and obviously that platform's gone on to be a big deal. And so he has good foresight. He knows what's going to pop off.
How did you build up your TikTok so fast?
We were making clips way differently. Like, so whatever was going on Instagram, it was being produced way different for TikTok, meaning the caption style is a little bit different. We're like, like this is back when like the songs really mattered. So it's like, okay, like there's this like sort of like viral trending song. Like how can we integrate Gary into this? And so it was like being like very intentional. Volume was like a big deal. Like we were pumping 4 or 5 clips a day at that point. And it was a different style of content. It was a little bit more memey. It was a little bit more funny. It was like a different energy, like Instagram and YouTube. I mean, YouTube were posting like these hour-long 4Ds consulting sessions. And it was super interesting because like I would follow Gary around and he would get stopped at airports all the time. And it was usually like between, you know, 25 and 35. And I remember in 2021, we stepped outside of like ad week and these like 13-year-old kids, I think it was like school was like letting out and they're like GaryVee, like from TikTok. And that was like, whoa, like it's actually like, it's happening. And it might've been earlier. It might have been like before COVID. I'm like trying to figure out the timeline, but that was the first moment where I was like, wow, like we're building a whole different fan base now.
Can you talk about the whole flow of the content?
Yeah, definitely. YouTube for the most part. And I think they're starting to be more intentional now, meaning they're coming up with a concept and they're filming that direct concept. That's happening a little bit more now. Back in the day, we didn't do that. It was all the document, don't create. And so our role as videographers, we're capturing the full day. And so that's going to become a vlog. And one part of that might be the keynotes. That might be a separate YouTube video. And yes, there might be a micro moment in there for TikTok that we're going to end up clipping. And a lot of clips came out that way. But I would say TikTok was the first platform where the team and Gary started being very intentional on the platform. Caleb would come up with a really good idea, try and like get him between meetings. Cause like literally that's what we had to do. Gary be in a meeting. We knew the meeting would be ending in 5 minutes. He might step out and then it'd be like, as he's walking to like another boardroom at VaynerMedia, he'd be like, hey Gary, I have this concept. Can you just like answer this question? And then like, boom, Caleb would be like filming on his iPhone, that thing. Most of the stuff that we were filming was being repackaged for long form or Instagram, TikTok felt like one of the first platforms where we were like dedicatedly making content for.
Jason, I want to grill you on what a day in the life looked like working for Gary Vee while he was doing his daily vlogs. Tell me what the start of your day looked like. Tell me about everybody that was involved and walk me through what a standard day looked like.
I had to wake up very early. It was like 7 o'clock. And mind you, I'm in my early 20s. Maybe I was editing late that morning or like late that past night. Probably got like 4 or 5 hours of sleep. Wake up, I'm like, oh wow, like I have to go get to Gary in the city and we're going to go to Rutgers College. He's doing a keynote there. Then we're going to head back into VaynerMedia. I remember that morning very specifically because the Lincoln Tunnel, I was living in New Jersey, was like a mess. And I'm just stressing out because it's like, you don't like miss the bus of like starting your day with Gary because then like the whole vlog's kind of ruined. I was stuck in traffic, but I was texting Gary's driver and I was like, hey, like I'm going to be out of this tunnel hopefully in like 40 minutes. Long story short, he did intercept me and pick me up. And the start of that day, like, you know, it was a car ride. And in that car ride, Gary is not just like sitting there, like doing nothing. He has like 14 phone calls. And in between that, if he doesn't have a phone call, he's like usually scrolling on like Twitter. And that's usually the moment where like the videographer, if we're like trained this way, that's when like it's a good time to ask some questions. And so, you know, shout outs to Caleb Ralston. He was a good mentor. He'd be like, always have questions ready. And he was right. Cause like Gary would end a phone call, scroll on Twitter and be like, hey Gary, why should leaders have more empathy? Boom. And that might be like another clip that like lived on TikTok, Instagram, whatever. And so that was like the morning ride. And I remember that morning we got to Rutgers. He had a keynote with the football players. And that was more like Gary Vee and like more leaning into the speaker that he is, not like the business person. Right from that, it was right back to Hudson Yards and basically him in his office for about 10 hours straight. It would be meeting with the CMO, you know, VaynerMedia. It might be meeting with like Zach Nadler, who's like the head of like Vayner Speakers, and they're talking about like that part of his company. Maybe his brother's coming in. His brother runs Vayner Sports. And so there's just like a collection under VaynerX that he was running. And so, you know, my job was to stay there and then keep on track because like not all those meetings were something we could record. And so sometimes I'd be like directly in the office because maybe he is having a podcast. Like maybe Neil deGrasse Tyson's coming in like he did. And we would record that interaction and that would become maybe a standalone YouTube video, maybe some clips. And then when it wasn't a meeting, we would either just like stand outside of his office if it was like a quick 20 minutes, just run some B-roll. But then other times it would be like, okay, cool. Like we have 2 hours. Let's just prop up the cameras, run a time lapse, go edit some stuff. But then it was always like nerve wracking because like you're sitting there editing and then he'll just like bust out of the office. Like he kind of like breaks the schedule and it's like, where's he going? What's happening? And then like his EA is like, oh yeah, he's got this, like, he's like taking a car ride, like just like go with him. And I'm like, okay. And they like grab your camera and then you're like, you know, figuring out like what your day looks like. And so a lot of times it was a lot of moving parts. In being his videographer, you're kind of like his on the ground admin. And so like you'd have to keep track of his bag and make sure you knew like where the car was going to be. And so I had a lot of learning lessons, like definitely like a lot of like, you know, missteps in starting that position where like I didn't realize like I'm more than just the camera guy who's just standing there.
It sounds like from the crack of dawn, you got to be ready because if you're not on Gary's wavelength, you're already behind on that day's video. So your day starts at 7. You mentioned somebody contacts you and says what the schedule looks like.
Yeah, Gary's team is split up between EAs, which was like assistants, scheduling, and also helping the videographers understand like what they should be doing that day. Then there's like the creative team. There might be like designers, videographers, editors. Then there's strategists, writers. But yeah, so like in the morning, usually the night before, ideally, you'd have like a good game plan of what that looked like. And we did get better over time of like color coding his calendar. So you'd know like, okay, like we're not going to hit these meetings, but his calendar was ever moving. And so like you could never be on top of it. Like whatever was scheduled last night changed by the morning. And so it was like a lot of moving parts. And there was definitely a lot of times where it's like, why are you here? You can't film this. Like you just took this like hour car ride and like you could have been editing. And it's like, you're right. And that just was like the nature of it.
Are you responsible for cutting the day that you filmed as well? Like, do you work up until, I don't know, a certain time a day and then it becomes editing time and you got to turn around everything you just filmed?
It's variable. Most days, the ideal case was if you shot it, it's best that you edit it because you have like all the context of like what the footage was. But that definitely wasn't always the case because David Rock, who's like Gary's original videographer.
D-Rock. Yeah.
D-Rock, he's the man. I love that guy. He inspired me to like have the sort of career that I have now, which we can get into. But he would spend a lot of time traveling with Gary. And so it wasn't always the case where he'd be editing his footage. For the most part, he was shooting. And so then a lot of that footage would land on Caleb Ralston, me, Dustin Lee, other video like editors along the way. And we got better at making better notes. And D-Rock is actually a really, really smart. It's a very like simple hack, but like while filming, he would just take a photo using Instagram of his screen because you could see the timestamp, and he would just write, "This was a good moment," or he'd write like a soundbite from it, and then just save that photo. And then at the end of the day, he would have about like 10 screenshots, and you'd have the timestamp, and it was like a little bit better than having nothing. Because like, you know, these cameras, there's no way to like just hit a button and like timestamp where you're at, especially when you're like moving at the speed and recording at the amount we are. And so like that was like a little bit of a hack. And so then at end of the day, we'd use like fire emojis. It'd be like 1 fire emoji to like 3 fire emojis of like how good the moment was. That would help the editor in the vlog, because then you'd be like, this is probably a moment I want to use. But also like the Instagram editor would be like, okay, of this whole day, seems like we have like 4 really good moments.
I mean, that's so helpful. Like when I grew up as an editor in this industry, right? That was my starting points as well. And I would always tell the creators that I was working for, like, film your thing. And then if you have some kind of reaction or something good going on, like turn the camera on yourself, or like if you're a camera operator and you're observing something good, turn on yourself and just say like, oh, that was a good moment or something like that. Because then in the edit, that's where I'm going to start my search for the good content, right? Like if you're in the moment, even with this show, we have an incredible editor, but after taping this episode, the next thing is to do like a little message at the end being like, okay, Ken, there were some really good moments up front. There was some good moments at the end. There's a part in the middle you can trim out, you know, lead with this question, because you're right in the moment. And as you're experiencing it, there's no better judgment of taste right then and there. So Definitely. It really helps the editor who might not actually be in the moment recording it, just know where a good starting point is.
Yeah. Dustin Lee, who's like an amazing part of, you know, Gary's growth, his hack was just putting his hand in front of the camera. At one point, it was like just him and like another editor. The team I think had condensed them a little bit. And it's a little bit easier. Like if you're like, you know, in a crowd with Gary, there's no taking out your phone and like taking a picture. So he just like throw the 5, the GaryVee5 up. And that was his way of logging like all his moments. And so like you just find what works. And those little hacks like mattered, because like the next day you're recording and the next day. And so then like all that footage get lost. And even though Gary had like a robust team, like I got lucky in the sense that they caught wind of like my name during a time where they were like 2 or 3 weeks backlogged on footage. And there was no way for them to, with the team they had, get to like a point where like they were current. And I was part of the team that like got them current again. And so like it was like super valuable, like of like why they brought me on at that point. Everyone thinks they have it, like these teams have it figured out. They do, but there's still a lot of missteps going on. Like organization could always be better.
Let's talk about that a little bit. I'm curious, like how you dealt with crises. Like maybe you had a big day of shooting and there wasn't a lot going on, or maybe you lost media. How did you solve those problems?
We used to call them like GaryVee's storms, which is actually probably the complete opposite. It was when Gary would sort of like flood the group chat with ideas and things that needed to get done. And all of those things would get done, but we call it a storm because like it was like we already have a lot going on. And now we need to like really like make sure like all these things are dialed and we can like prioritize what's right. Totally separate thing. I guess in crises moments, I mean, nothing critical though. Nothing where like
you never missed a day or anything.
No, nothing. No, I mean, there was days that missed. I mean, I don't want to like throw D-Rock under the bus, but I know on his first international trip, he missed the plane. So like,
right.
That was that's a crises moment, but
he has 1,000 more wins than he does for a single
D-Rock has 1,000 more wins.
So he's a legend in the space. I remember really admiring him and appreciating him when I was kind of on my come up as well. So yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. No, I mean, like, it's like no one can bat a perfect season or whatever. It's like so much respect for David because he took on so much of the weight in the beginning when there was no team. Like it was like filming all day and then like making the daily beat at night. And then at one point, like Tyler Babin came in and was like his partner in crime and doing that. But even then, like 2 people doing that is ridiculous. Like, that team grew to like I said, 30 people. And so, yeah, I just always had like so much respect for like what he did. And I lived a little bit of it, prior to working for Gary. I had been introduced to him by like my first client and we were like emulating what they were doing. And so, but at a small scale. And even that was very hard.
I want to ask you about Caleb Ralston because he is definitely a leader in the YouTube education space right now. And you worked with him for quite a long time. What makes him so good at what he does? What makes him special?
Caleb is incredible. What he's building with Ralston is, I'm just like so proud of him. And I'll start from the beginning. Like the day I met him, it was like one of my first days in the office. And I remember he came up to me and he was like, I have your back. If you need anything, like I got you. And he's like, I just want to make sure you you have like an ally on the team. And that's like carried like into my career. Like I've done that like so much for like other teams that I've been on, and like even the people like on my team that I manage, like I let them know that. Like I think I've just like I felt that deeply because it was nerve-wracking to like join that team. And Caleb branded himself as pretty much like the guy that will get it done. Caleb would stay in the office like overnight to make sure these trash talk episodes would get done.
So reliability, that's like the key distinguishing factor. You can count on him no matter what.
Yeah, reliability. And he grew such in his career because at one point, you know, like he was just like sort of the videographer and editor for Gary. And then, you know, along the way, he became the brand director for Alex and Layla. He started teaching me so much, and he really helped me have the perspective of like, hey man, like there's more to your career than like just being like a videographer and editor. He's like, he's the one that actually helped position me and get in contact with Mike Posner. He's like, I really think this would be like big for your career to stop, like get out of the, just being like sort of like in the editor seat and learn how to like manage a team. I'm still learning from him like to this day. You know, obviously we were seeing the content, but a lot of respect for Caleb.
Is that a natural gift of his, or do you think like he's learned it by watching Gary or by reading about it or studying?
Probably just reps. He's been in the game for a while. You know, he's worked for tons of personal brands for like the past like 17, 18 years. And so I think he was really good at absorbing the information. I could tell like he could really listen to like Gary, and that would like trickle back to like what we were making. And so I bet you like in theory, yeah, like he was absorbing all this information.
If someone wanted to build their own version of Daily V, or if you had to build Daily V from scratch again today, what would be your playbook?
I would first like make sure that's like something that you want to do. Like start with like the why. What is Daily V? Daily V is like the documentation of your life that you're going to put into vlog form and put on the internet, and people are going to watch that. If you don't want people knowing a lot about you, then you probably shouldn't do that. So like I would start there. Make sure like you're doing it for all the right reasons. If you do want to do it, if you're like, no, I do want people like to learn from me, know about my life. And you can make restrictions of like, Gary does a very good job of like not showing his family and like personal life, even though he's like highly documented. So you can do both. But if you're going about creating it, you can start with yourself. Like you don't need the David Rock. You don't need Jason. I would start by, just like documenting core moments of your day. If you're on Zoom calls all day, just try and like record stuff and see if you can make something of yourself. That might be challenging for like the entrepreneur who's not really a creator. And so if that's the case where like you're self-shooting and like nothing's getting made from it, it's just like living in your camera roll, then maybe the next step is like, hey, like let me see if I can self-record and then send this to an editor. If that doesn't start working out well because like you're just not capturing enough, then I think, you might want to hire a videographer at that point. But I would be very intentional. I think maybe 4 or 5 years ago, it would have made a lot more sense to have a videographer around, capture your day-to-day. That might make for a vlog, and then maybe some like short form content to really get the value out of that, like the time spent, the budget to go into that. I think you should be more intentional. I wouldn't like record your whole day. I would be like, okay, like I have this podcast I'm on. I'm going to like have my videographer set up camera so we have like a more high def version of it, and I can like clip moments from that. And then maybe I have like a, meeting with my business partner and we can record some content out of that. But I think more than document, don't create, I think now it's like, can your videographer at that point maybe have sourced like 10 questions from the moments they recorded through the day and start asking questions. And I think that would actually make for better content now. I don't think, unless your life is very interesting, that most people are going to watch a 15-minute vlog. And so I would love that to be the case because it's such a fun job to like document and make these things, but it's not for everyone. I don't think like content getting, I guess, more saturated. People are not going to watch like the everyday person's 15-minute vlog. So you have to be very intentional of like what you're making.
Yeah. I've heard that you have to really give yourself constraints when you're making vlogs. I think 10 years ago, it was fair game to just record your day and people would sit with you and enjoy it. But I think now, you really need to frame it around some kind of objective or some kind of area of expertise, because there's just too much out there for random people to get interested in other random people.
Definitely.
I think like the classic example is, I hate to point all things to Ryan Trahan's Penny series and that kind of stuff, but I think that is like what the vlog, like that's the best version of the vlog in 2026, in my opinion. Just because there were constraints, there was a mission, there was something to rally behind. I'm not saying that everything needs to be challenge driven.
Yeah.
But I think the tighter you go, the higher likelihood of success you will have making vlog content.
Definitely. And I think like if somebody was like watching this and they're like interested in having a vlog, I think like almost the better way of navigating it is like interview 10 videographers and tell them like, hey, I want you to like come with me for like a few hours of my day. And instead of just being a fly on the wall, I want you to ask like really good questions. And that's like a lot of what I did with Mike Posner. So Mike hired me as his head of content, and we didn't create a vlog, but I would spend a lot of time with him, and I was very just curious about his life. And a lot of those clips ended up becoming good content. Like example was like, I would spend all day with him and we were in his car and taped on his steering wheel. It was like a notepad. He had wrote on it. It said, "I, Mike Posner, vow to love myself no matter what." And I was like, and he just taped it like crudely on his steering wheel. And I was like, he didn't make a mention of it. And I was like, why'd you do that? He's basically like, I need to remind myself this. He's like, I'm, fighting for happiness. Like whatever his answer was, either way, it was super interesting to me. And so I recorded that. Like it wasn't like I was just being curious and nosy. That became a moment. And so like having a videographer around, maybe being a little nosy and curious and being more of like a journalist in your life can actually, I think, make for really good content.
I just wrote a note to myself to start asking our CEO more questions.
Yeah, I think like, yeah, it's hard when you're not like with them maybe directly if you struggle to make content. And I struggle with like directly talking to a camera, even podcasts, but conversations work really well. It's way easier for me to like have a conversation with you than it would be like for me to like turn to this camera and be like, here's my 10 tips on personal brand. And I think a lot of other content creators and people that are making content for people, they should lean into more conversational type content.
What were the biggest differences between working with Gary Vee and working with Mike Posner?
It's a great question because Gary's very unique and Mike is very unique. This is not to say that Gary's not an artist, because he is, but Mike is a true artist. He is such a good writer. That's why he's gone on to write like these platinum hits for like Justin Bieber, Maroon 5, and himself. Watching him in the studio, hear a beat, and then like just cultivate a line that turned into like this whole like beautiful ballad. It's way different than watching Gary approach like a business meeting and just like, it's almost actually the same, but it's like different. Mike's pocket was like cultivating like this sonic, like I said, ballad. And then Gary would like watch this like masterpiece of like how he would like pick apart maybe like a business or like a entrepreneur that needed help. And I would see like the art of what he was doing there. Gary was coming up with like a lot of the strategy and ideas. Like before I talked about, Gary's like, I'm noticing TikTok's really working. Like, or like, it's going to be this thing. We need to like, lean in there. With Mike, he wasn't like that. So it was more on me as the head of content to like bring these ideas to the table and also make the call for like, we're doing something and be like, hey, like we shouldn't do this anymore. That was the core difference. And that helped me. I had to learn a lot because like, I realized like how much maybe I was like leaning on Gary, how much was getting done just because he's such good, like a brain in content and strategy. And so with Mike, it was the reverse. If you just positioned him well, he would deliver, but he's not going to like come up with like, go hard on LinkedIn.
That's like a career trajectory that I've heard a number of times where you kind of like learn from somebody else who leads the charge, but then the next step is for you to be that person for somebody else. And it sounds like, you got your reps in with Gary and then it was time to become the leader yourself. And you became that leader for Mike Posner, and you were involved, like you were responsible for coming up with video ideas, the social strategy. So like, what was your game plan going into working with him? You're working with this incredible artist, platinum records, ghostwriting for other legendary artists, and you've been asked to be his content lead. How do you solve that problem?
Yeah, in a world where like it's just me, him, and his virtual EA. There's no agency, there's no other team. Like it's just me and him, and I live in Amsterdam and he's in Los Angeles. How are we going to do this? And that was like a big question. It was like, how is this going to get done? And I did end up spending half the year in 2024 with him. So I did like invest a lot of energy being with him because the answer was like, well, I have to get a lot of this done right now. In the beginning of it, there was like a partnership, like where he wanted to create a podcast out the gate. That was one of his ideas in bringing me on. And we did have a studio where he would go to and record that content. And I was sort of like virtually producing it before like the first few weeks until I got out there with him. That was objective number one. Let's get the ball rolling. Let's find a podcast studio. Let's make sure it's getting edited. Let's get this all rolling. One of the best pieces of advice I got before leaving Vaynermedia, because I like met with like all the people that I had met in the ecosystem of it, was from Tyler Schmidt. And he used to be Gary's EA, and then he ran 137. Now he's like his relationships manager. He's a really great guy. He said, stay close to the work. Really what he meant was, don't just like offload all the duties of building Mike's brand to other people. Do it yourself, and then you'll have a way better way of managing the people that are going to end up doing it anyways. And so I kind of took that to heart, and it was kind of just the natural evolution of working with Mike anyways. I went out there, I was filming, and then at night I was editing. And then if we had a YouTube video, I was posting it. And then at first I was making the thumbnails and I like shouldn't have been. And then like right away you start like realizing, okay, like my core skill set is not making thumbnails. I need to hire someone. But at least I kind of like gone through the rhythm of it. And when I wasn't in LA, I had like hire videographers, but I had already spent like a lot of time with him. And so I understood like how to approach that situation. Cause it's like, kind of putting a rover on Mars. It's not like as easy as just being like, hey, show up at this time and like, ask these questions. It's, hey, like, this is the best way to position you to like get the most out of Mike during this time, where his time's like limited and he's a busy guy. I stayed close to the work, and then I just had to like, I had to figure out like what was important to Mike. And at the time it was like, we want to do the podcast. And then over the short couple months, we realized like, hey, this is not the best format for him, because we're kind of at the mercy of like when guests are available and working with his schedule. And it's like, this is not like the most scalable thing. We ended up doing like a lot of stuff, but we just really leaned into like Instagram as his main platform and started to like really picking apart like his sort of past. I'm not working with him currently. He has another creative director, but it's cool to see like some of the stuff that we were doing has like evolved and is like still part of like their content strategy. And one of them is just like the carousels. Like I remember Mike was only posting video content. I texted him. I was like, hey, I would love to like post note screenshots. Like I want you to like wholeheartedly like write something. I'm just going to screenshot it. We're going to like make carousels out of it, because I want people to feel you. I don't want it to feel like overproduced all the time. Like, it's okay that we're going to make some reels that like are edited and obviously not from you. But if like I want to make quote style images, I want to go like super raw. And one of like the first ones like went like super viral, and we've like evolved it. Like it was basically his 10 years since writing the song, I Took a Pill in Ibiza. And he wrote about being 27, what the line was, and like being 37 and what like the difference was in that line. And it was like, that song basically is like, I took a pill in Ibiza. And then like the next line 10 years later would be like, I've been sober for 10 years. And like the other line would be like, I drive a sports car.
Oh,
to
interesting.
blah, 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 blah. The next line would be, I drive a Toyota 4Runner. I don't care what people think. And it was like, and so he sent me this and I was like, this is pretty good. And then I just kind of ripped it up like any other post, and it just went like super viral. Publications picked it up and wrote articles about it. What's cool is like the team, they continue to like sort of use that as a format that they took it into like super visual. Like they like took like high def photos and like made it like more of like a magazine type version of it. And cooler than that, like I saw Mike, he has a new song coming out, and it's literally sort of a remix of I Took a Pill in Ibiza, and it's sung to the tune of it, but it's like the words of it are like what his life's currently like now.
It's interesting having listened to you for the last little while now. I feel like one through line from everything that you've worked on is I think you have a really good sense of taste. When you were working with Gary and you were being his videographer, it's one thing to just film moments, but also to kind of know what's going on situationally and have the questions prepared, like the right kind of questions. Like that requires taste. And then as you talked about Mike Posner and, some of the work you were doing with him, you were able to identify moments, in his artistry that would make really good pieces of content. And that's because you are good at cultivating taste. So the question that I have is, how did you attain that taste? Is that like natural talent, or is that through decades of consuming content, or is there any kind of like special artistry that you've paid extra attention to become who you are?
Yeah, I hate to be the guy that's like, it's a natural born talent. I think I've made so much content. Like before GaryVee, I was like working for a gentleman that owned a gym, and he was like the one that introduced me to like this guy GaryVee, and he has a vlog, and I want to like make that style of content. And I made a lot of content with just that gentleman. Like we started an agency, and we're making for other entrepreneurs. Gary, I made so much content, and I think part of me didn't want to just make like the next thing. I'm trying to make it interesting. I'm trying to change it up. And in a world where like Instagram, TikTok, like everything feels the same, I'm like, how do we stand out? Like, how do I win? Like, if I don't make good content here, if the results don't come in, like Mike might not want to work with me. And so like kind of took a bet on like these things. If I feel a little interested about this steering wheel thing, I think a lot of other people are going to be interested about it. It's probably working on Gary's team along the way, but I feel like it was like, if you have like any interest in it, there's probably a lot of other people that are going to like want to hear more about that. And I think that's like, as an editor, you kind of like tune out stuff after a while. If you're like watching something for like hours and hours, especially like editing a vlog, I might actually not be like hearing the whole dialogue, but sometimes you catch something, you'd be like, oh, that's actually like super fire, Gary. In that case, I might like send that to like the Instagram team. But I think we got really good at just like narrowing in these hot moments. And so I think it's reps is really the answer. I think I've done it a lot of times through just filming and then bringing these things into edit, where I've kind of like come more in tune to like what might be interesting to other people.
And is that measured by performance success, or is that measured by something else? Because you mentioned, working with a fitness guy, and I'm like, how the hell does that translate to Mike Posner? Like, it doesn't seem very, there's a lot of translate. But when you're posting content, you're getting that feedback by views. Is that what is helping you identify good moments, or is there something else to it?
There was a little bit more on Mike's side. We, I would say, didn't fully develop this, but it was part of our strategy. In a world where Mike hired me to help people, his whole thing was health and happiness. It came from his father. It's like the two most important things to him. And Mike sort of built that into his brand. So like in anything we did, we were trying to help people. He didn't necessarily care about the numbers as much. He was caring about the depth. We would track like deep comments. A deep comment might be like, hey, like I opened up my feed today. I saw this video. I'm so glad. Like it saved my life basically. And so we would measure success a lot based on deep comments. And so that was like, I wouldn't say not scalable, but it's a different kind of metric than just like tracking your results. To be all technical, like the best way I think you should go about it, if you're being like just data driven, is just like track month to month. Down months are okay, but quarter to quarter, you should be going up in terms of like overall reach. Like that's like the most mathy way to put it. But then like on the Mike side, we like narrowed in like what was his why? Why are we making content? And his thing was like, I want to change lives. And so like I would go through his DMs every day and like screenshot like 15 messages that were like insane. And I'd send it to him and he'd be like, Jason, thank you so much for sending this to me. And it gave him so much more like life and like energy to like want to shoot with me tomorrow. Cause he doesn't want to wake up in the morning and have a camera in his face. But then like when he sees like save someone's life or got someone out of bed, like he felt really great about that. So, we were tracking the right things, but these other things that were important to us.
That tracks with us too, because like our show is very, very small. Gimbal is a very small podcast at the moment. But when people comment something that's like really substantial, Alina and I, we definitely shoot it to each other. It gives us a little bit of like, oh, thank goodness, we're doing the right thing. We're on the right track, because the numbers aren't where we want them to be. Like eventually we'll get there by getting in more reps. But right now there is definitely more importance to like really meaningful comments from people. So that's good to hear.
Yeah, I think it's not all about the numbers, and we know that. And I think it's so easy now. There's like so many tools to like track everything, like how many people have dropped off over the first 6 seconds, and it can inform you like, like it informs like what you should do. But I just think like it kind of takes the magic away from it. I don't know how to like word it and get too like spiritual about it, but there was like some form of magic in terms of like moments and things that I recorded with Mike that didn't come from like data. And it did come from like staying true to like the why. One of the projects we worked on was with Make-A-Wish, and it was a girl who had like terminal cancer, and she always wanted to make a song. And like we went into the studio, I recorded the behind the scenes of it. Mike wrote a song with her. They created a song together, and one of the pieces of content had results, but like we didn't care. Like we were just doing what we wanted to do, like the mission that we had with making content, and that was all we needed. It's not about like how many more followers we got from that.
How do you decide what a creator should be known for and then translate that into actual recurring like content formats and series?
I have a client I'm thinking of right now that we've just onboarded her. We're building out her personal brand at large. The company that she runs, it's like a 9-figure business that basically coaches women and mostly minorities to build wealth. They have like coaching programs, in-person events. And so a lot of the content is around money. And, if you're making $100,000 or more, we're trying to like build content out that would serve those people, because it's going to bring in more clients for her. And like, that's valid for her. I think for anyone, if you're investing meaningful money into your personal brand, it has to have like a business. It has to feed it back in one way or another. And so that's like one way of, figuring out like what kind of content you're going to make. Outside of that, we make a lot of content for her that's like about travel and her being a mom and her working out, because like she's enjoying that journey. And so you can't just be one thing, because then you'll just like look like the 4 entrepreneurs on the internet that we all know, and we'll just all look the same. And so for her, I'm at the beginning of the journey, but I'm spending more time with her. And like, one idea that she had and we're executing on is that she wants to do like pop-up events at coffee shops. Like in a world where like everything's going AI and like digitize, she's like, I want to meet up with people. And like, I just want to do like live Q&A. And it's not the most scalable thing. It takes a lot of energy, set up these events, go there. But that's just like one way of like how she wants to create content. She wants to be like physically in the room with people. She probably took a step back and was like, I've been doing podcasts for all these years and I'm burnt out from just like staring at a camera and being like in the room with like no one. She's like, I want to be with people. That's what fuels me up. And so that's like how she's figuring it out and how we're figuring it out, how to make her content. So I think it's like probably a conversation with your team lead or just yourself if you're a creator, just being like, how do I want to make content? Caleb says it like Caleb Ralston, go back to him. He has a really good way of saying it, but basically it's like make content while doing something that you love. he has like amazing videos where he's like out in like Las Vegas where he's like riding his motorcycle, but then he's also telling this like amazing story about like personal brand. That's probably really dope to him because he's getting to like create content while he's like riding his motorcycle and it's pairing himself with something he loves. I think that's a really good like piece of advice that I learned from him. And I kind of like knew, but it was like he put it to words, and I think people should do it more. It's like pairing it with stuff you love. It's a really good way to like get out some good stuff.
All right, Jason, who is a creator that's on your radar right now that's worthy of a shout out?
I wouldn't say it's just a creator, it's a brand. They're called First Class Jerk. They're in the hospitality space, and they make really great content about luxury hotels, travel. Adam Lovick's the face of it. His partner's Matt Ripple. They create amazing content. I think they're navigating the travel space way differently than a lot of other people. It's tasteful. It's authentic to them. I don't know. I just really love the content. And I will say I am helping them out on some YouTube videos. So, a little biased, but without me in the equation, they are making really dope travel content. And I think everyone should check them out.
All right, Jason, thank you so much for being on the show. It was a pleasure meeting you and speaking with you and hearing all of the knowledge you have to share.
Thanks, guys. This was really fun, and I really appreciate you guys having me on, and maybe we'll do it again maybe a couple months.
That's the episode. Thank you so much for watching and listening. If you're new here and you enjoyed, please consider subscribing or leaving us a review on the audio platforms. It really helps this show in its earliest days. If you want to check out another episode, please look at our library and pick one from the list. I will see you next week.